BitSwap is the hottest new way to trade tokens. Crawling all the top decentralized exchanges, BitSwap will get you the very best price and value for your trades. BitSwap is changing the game. Try it now at bitswapdex.com.
Welcome to Rice TVX and today's episode of Rice Rewind. Today's show is a re-release of my interview with Edward Griffin that was originally recorded on August 7th, 2020. Edward Griffin is the author of the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. This book will teach you everything you want to know about the creation of the Federal Reserve and more. And just in case you don't know, the Federal Reserve is the third attempt at central banking in the United States. Before we get into it, make sure you visit ricetvx.com and sign up for my mailing list so you never miss an update or new Rice TVX content. Plus, you can find my social media links, contact information, get Rice TVX merch coming soon via the shop, and more. If this is your first time ever watching any of my videos, check out and explore my channels. Make sure you subscribe to Rice TVX and Rice TVX2, both can be found on YouTube. And hit the notification bell to get alerted to new videos. Also, you can follow me on Odyssey and Library, where I have my full catalog of videos plus extra content. And you can also find Rice TVX on BitChute. If you want to support Rice TVX and what I do directly, I have my PayPal, Cash App, plus my cryptocurrency addresses via my Cointree link below in the video description. You can also join my Patreon channel where you will get early access to some of my videos, exclusive content, and more, with 4 different levels of membership, all offering something different. If you are looking to purchase and invest in precious metals, gold and silver are both good safe haven assets to hedge against the financial collapse we are experiencing. Check out Money Metals Exchange. I partnered up with them and you can get a free ½ ounce of silver. Visit moneymetals.com, be a first-time buyer, purchase a minimum of $100, and use the promo code RICE. You get a free ½ ounce of silver, and it's another way to support the channel. And joining me on today's Rice Report is a very special guest, someone who has inspired me and helped educate me and helped to teach me about what the Federal Reserve is, and that is Edward Griffin, who I have the honor and privilege of bringing on the report. Mr. G, I really appreciate you coming on. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Well, thanks for inviting me.
Well, I really honestly, as I said before we started, appreciate you accepting my invitation. I'm a bit of a fanboy. I can't lie. I'm not coming at this from an unbiased perspective because you have completely won me over. And as I said at the beginning of the video, a lot of people who are in the freedom liberty movement are familiar with this book. But if you don't own this book, I would definitely encourage you to invest in it and check it out. So I guess before we get started, how's everything been going with you this year with everything happening with the pandemic, the riots and all the social unrest and everything that's been going on? How's life been treating you and your family?
Well, I have to say that life has been very good for myself and my family. I mean, it's hard to say that really because it sounds like one might be insensitive to what's going on in the rest of the world. But right here where we live, it's pretty much the same as always. Of course, I work pretty much out of my briefcase, out of my home, and wherever I happen to be. So it makes little difference in my daily routine, but it's invigorating. And by that, I mean not to ignore the seriousness of what's going on in the world today, but it seems like everything is coming to a head. And it's invigorating in a sense that I feel that this is an opportunity for people like us to make a difference, a real difference, because the wound is open and everybody is sensitized to what's going on. And for the first time, almost everyone is really interested, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I used to get a lot of glazed looks in people's eyes when I started to tell them about the trends and the movements and where this is all headed. It's like, who cares? Life is wonderful now. Who cares about all that stuff? But now I don't see too many glazed looks. I sometimes get some angry looks because I'm not really a big fan of masks and all that kind of outward symbolism of obedience and
I just get an inhaler.
compliance.
This helps a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Even if it
But
doesn't really, even if I don't really have asthma, just carrying that helps.
That's good. Well, anyway, just to answer your question, simplify it. Everything is for me is going very well, and we are living in exciting times. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Truly, and I think it's going to be very historic times, and the whole phrase of hindsight is 2020. I think is going to have a whole new meaning pretty soon. Now, I don't want to rehash about what the Federal Reserve is, because if somebody's watching this video, they should be familiar. If they're not, I've got lots of videos talking about it. You've got lots of videos, and you wrote a book about it. So I couldn't think of a more privileged time to have you on the show, honestly, because everything that you've written about, we're kind of now beyond the book, in a sense. This is now we see what the creature has developed into, what kind of power it has obtained, and what it is currently doing, and what it's been doing for quite some time. But just focusing in on just 2008 to currently, it's been a mess. And but they've gotten way more powerful than they needed to be, and there was nothing that we did as the people to stand up, and they just simply got consent of the governed and got to move forward, and here we are. And I'd like to get your feelings on what you think is currently happening with the Federal Reserve in regards to the Treasury Department, Donald Trump executive orders, the idea that there's a possibility that the Federal Reserve will be enveloped by the Treasury and come to an end. I see Donald Trump talking about trying to end taxation of income and capital gains taxes, et cetera, which would essentially just obsolete the IRS and get rid of the IRS. Do you think that we're headed into this post-Fed world?
The reason I'm pausing is because there's a lot of yeses and nos in my mind on various aspects of what you said there. Certainly things are changing. In a very real sense, I could say that, yeah, I agree with you that it's post-Fed, all right. But that doesn't mean that it's post the concept of the Fed. I think that what is happening is a transition to a higher level of control, a higher level of theft, a higher level of fraud. I mean, everything is not going to be better, as Mr. Trump tends to say it is. It's going in the other direction. And I think what the transition involves is moving the world into a cryptocurrency. And contrary to the image that is being deliberately fed to the unknowing public, the image is that, oh my gosh, the cryptocurrencies are going to allow for individuals to be free of government control and be free of those big bad banks. Oh, isn't it wonderful? Bring it on. And when in reality, in my view, the whole thing has been sort of orchestrated for a long, long time to ease into it, because the cashless society is really the banker's dream, has been for so long. And for obvious reasons to your listeners, no doubt, but for some new people that might come along, I'll just say that in a cashless society, you have no independence of those who create the cash. In other words, the Federal Reserve System and all the central banks of the world create the money. And if you can take that money and put it in your mattress or carry it around in your pocket, it gives you a certain amount of independence that really is not part of the master plan for the future for these people. They don't want us to have that kind of independence and mobility, and they don't want us to be hidden from view. They want us to know everything we do, every little chewing gum package we purchased and where we were when we bought it. And if they could get away with it, they want to know what we said at the time we bought it and what our blood pressure was, so they could figure out our mental attitude and things like that. And so This has been the dream of these people who are psychopaths. I believe they want total control over all of us. And so a cashless society is a necessary part of that fulfillment of that dream. And so how do you sell it? See, now we are getting to something that really is interesting and maybe more worthy of conversation is how do you sell a very unpleasant idea to the masses and let them think it's a good idea? This has been the story of our history ever since World War I, is how do you sell international schemes, monetary schemes, cultural schemes, things? How do you sell that to the people and take away their liberty and their freedom and tax the hell out of them and limit their their privacy and now they lock them into their homes and tell them to stand 6 feet apart and put a piece of cloth around their faces? How do you get people to do all of those things, which would be a terrible affront in a free society, and let them say, yeah, well, I'll do that. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you bet. Let me show you how good I am at this. And well, the answer, of course, is that you scare them into it. You create boogeymen. And we've seen that tactic used for a long, long time. I'm just going to go back to World War II. Every time we've had a major war, we've given up huge chunks of our liberty and our privacy and our wealth. Why? Because we're afraid of being conquered by some big, bad foreign regime. It's like Nazis. So we don't want to be invaded by the Nazis or the Japanese imperialists, or we don't want, all of these terrible things. So we'll give up a big chunk of our liberty and our privacy and our monetary stability just to protect us. And then we got to be protected against terrorism. And then we'd be protected against crime and drugs in the street and be protected against the destruction of our environment. Global warming is going to destroy the planet. We need protection. And now we got to be protected against a virus that nobody's ever seen. It's all theoretical. But we got to be protected against. It reminds me of when I was a kid, I used to really believe that there was something under the bed at night. And every once in a while, somebody would say, well, you know what's in your closet in the middle of the night, don't you? Well, I'm a little kid. I didn't know what's in my closet. Well, I wouldn't open that closet if I were you. And I found out later that, adults have a way of using the boogeyman tactic to scare little kids. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, the boogeyman is going to get you. And little kids, well, the boogeyman, yeah, it must be real because everybody talks about it. It must be very, very real. And your imagination goes the rest of the way. And it was many years later that I realized, oh, that's the same tactic that the master politicians have been using in the populations of the world for as long as I can remember. And so now we come to the present time. This explains everything. I'm going to say most, not all. You got to have a certain amount of real threat along the way to make it look valid. But most of the things we've been so frightened to death of are boogeymen. There's nothing under the bed. There's nothing in the closet. And yet we believe there is. And so you get the people to willingly wear the mask and to give up all of these liberties and to do everything and be angry at somebody who isn't doing those things because they think it's for their own good. They think it's for the greater good of the greater number, which is the mantra of collectivism. This is at the core, the heart of 99.9% of all of the problems of the world today, as far as I can see, is this ideology of is for your own good and it's for the greater good of society. You have to be sacrificed because you're just an individual. Don't get in the way. Thank you for helping everybody. You're a team player. All of those things we learned in school. This is at the core of how they get us to willingly give up our liberties and our everything else. Now we've got riots in the street. Surely we understand. You can tell by looking at the videos if you just open your eyes. Those are not normal people throwing rocks through windows, breaking windows, setting fire to buildings. Those are professionals, ladies and gentlemen. Look at them. They're all dressed alike. They've got expensive gear on them. They're all in black hoods, and they got the right tools. They all work together. They're throwing bombs. They're shooting. I mean, these are professional soldiers. They're mercenaries. They've been hired by people like George Soros and his foundations, and probably the deep state is involved in some things. They need to fight out there. They need to scare us. That's the boogeyman. But it's not real. I mean, it's real in the sense that fire burns and people die and all of this sort of thing. But it's staged. It's manipulated. It's really good theater. And so here we go. I mean, it's just continual. And until the people of the world, I was going to say people of America, but I'm going to say until the people of the world wake up to the fact They've been constantly being frightened by a boogeyman. And almost everywhere you look, you see a different boogeyman coming at you. We're not going to solve this problem until people understand that this is a trick being played on them and it's mostly just theater.
I totally agree, and you couldn't have said that any better. I was actually writing down some notes, and I'll kind of go over what I was going to talk about with what you said in response. You mentioned cashless society and cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and I'm definitely big and advocate for cryptocurrency, especially decentralized cryptocurrencies and decentralized blockchains. With that being said, I know the push for the digital dollar, the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, and even digital ID is a bad idea. I know that we can't get rid of cash completely. And I know that ultimately, when people start to understand the surveillance and the lack of privacy that they're going to have, or their taxes or whatever, just taken right out of their accounts without them even approving of it, because that's how the system is going to be set up for. If it goes that far, then you can see people going back to the barter system, almost living like Native Americans and just trading things and trading. I wouldn't mind working someplace so I can earn, food, so I can feed my family.
But they won't let you do that, of course.
Well, they won't, but then that goes into what we're doing and what you've been doing in Red Pill University. We need to get the consent of the people. We need to wake enough people up. If enough people take a stand, Mr. G, and you know this, if enough people take a stand, nothing can stand against us.
That is so true. It could be very bloody, but it was still enough people. So the question is, what is enough? And how do you reach that enough people? That's really where I'm spending most of my time nowadays, are those two issues. What is that critical number, and how do you reach them, and how do you make sure that they're not going to be diverted by propaganda and false leadership? Controlled opposition is the most powerful tool our enemy has. They know that we're thinking about these things, and they're not standing around waiting to see what we're going to do. They're going, and if they haven't already done so, they put people in our path who appear to be leaders of our point of view. Mm-hmm. They have a script, they read, they know what we want them to say. And so they always say the right things. But if you notice, when it comes to push to shove, they don't actually do those things. They just talk about them, Yeah. And I'm not saying this is just Mr. Trump, but there are a lot of people like that. That's wonderful things. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. I'm for this. I don't like those bankers. I'm going to stop immigration, illegal immigration, by making it legal and so forth. But when the end of the year comes, none of those things happen. It's just talk. So controlled opposition, we know that they're going to put people like that in our path so that we will follow those who will lead us over the cliff. So those are the issues. We can talk about the problems all day long, but we got to understand how do we reach that critical mass of people, which in my view is probably about 15% of the population. I think the other 85% will always follow the 15 and say, well, whoever wins, that's fine with me. And the 15% will follow a cadre of about 3%, who are the real movers and shakers that really dedicate their lives to this thing. And the 3% are going to be heavily influenced by about 1%, who are the real thought leaders. And if you look at the American Revolution, for example, I think it's a great example. How many people actually caused the American Revolution to happen? Who are these people that signed the Declaration of Independence, signed the Constitution, wrote the pamphlets, gave the speeches, raised the militia? How many? 200 or 300? At the most. The whole bloody American Revolution was the life force of maybe less than 500 people. But of course, there were 3% that really got together, and those are the guys with the arms, and they went and stood at the bridge at Concord, and they crossed the Delaware. That was the 3%, and the other 15% supplied them, supported them, and the other 85% were waiting to see who was going to win. So there's nothing different today from that. That's the formula we are facing, and we have to figure out how to reach those 15%. And now that doesn't mean we have to stand at the bridge with our muskets, because in fact, I'm glad that topic just popped up, because some people think, well, I'm going to lock and load, man. They're not going to take my guns away. As long as we got our guns, we're all right. These people don't have it figured out. This is a battle for the minds of people. If we don't have ideology, if we don't have the principles, we're going to lose, because first of all, there are weapons out there in those warehouses that people have no idea how powerful they are. I mean, we're talking about laser weapons. We're talking about turning a whole crowd of people, 1,000 people, 5,000, 10,000 people. It's like putting them into a microwave oven. They'll just be boiled from the inside out with electromagnetic energy. People don't understand that these things exist. And then there's chemical warfare, there's atomic bombs, there's, all kinds of things. There are even bugs that they keep inventing and threatening to turn loose. And it used to be that, like in the American Revolution, it was a contest of how many men you had with muskets, because all the muskets in the world were the same. So it's just a question who had the most muskets and the most ammunition, and the most cannonballs. Today, it's not that way at all. Technology has changed everything.
Right.
So this is never going to be decided today in a street battle or things like that. And that's good in many levels. First of all, we have lost our liberties, not with guns and bayonets, but through ideas and taking over legislators and taking over the educational system and controlling the media. It's a control of the mind is how we lost this. And that's how we're going to take it back. So we come back to your point, is how many people do we need to have this clear vision, to really understand what's going on, and how many people do we need to be the movers and shakers and lead that thought revolution? It's not as big a number as you might think. I'm very encouraged. The more I think about it, I think that if we can reach 1% of the population with the ideas that we're talking about, that 1% will mobilize the 15% and we win. It's just a question now, how much time do we have to do it? And we're running out of time. So let's quit talking about it. Let's do it. That's what I say.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to do along with others. And I'm not saying that from an egotistical point of view. I'm just trying to help be the change that I want to see in this world, and feel very much led to do so. And you mentioned Donald Trump. I'm not a huge fan. I'm not for or against Donald Trump. You mentioned the founding fathers. I've got some people looking into this. Do you think that there is any possibility that right now, with everything that's been going on, with all the executive orders, that Donald Trump is trying to essentially restore the republic of what the original government was supposed to be based off our founding fathers, but also it's now time for people like us to stand up so that the consent of the governed can come into play? I mean, do you think that's a possibility, or is he just playing ball like everybody else and everybody's got their hopes up for nothing?
Well, I don't feel qualified to really pass judgment on that last part.
Okay.
I don't think that what Mr. Trump does or doesn't do has an awful lot to do with it. He's one man. If he really stood in the way of the opposition we know is out there, I think he would probably be gone by now. He would probably have an accident or have some poisoned food, or I don't know, maybe his plane wouldn't land correctly. Who knows?
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to do that. And the fact that he is always standing, in today's world, in the political world especially, people don't vote for somebody. They vote against somebody. It's that I don't like this guy, but I really hate the other one. And so I'm
right.
going, it's the lesser of two evils. That's been the game they've been playing with us for so long. I can't remember it actually being much other than that.
Well, South Park, if you've never seen this, and I'll send you a link to it because this is classic. South Park, the adult cartoon, they had a skit about elections and politicians, and it always came down to a douche or a turd sandwich. It was either you had a douche or, instead of the lesser of two evils. But
that's it. Well, it's so obvious when you think about it, but yet people are very sober about it. Oh, we'll go to these conventions. They don't realize that both the Republican Party and the Democrat Party really have essentially the same leadership. The leaders of those parties go to the same cocktail parties, and they talk about it. They move back and forth, and aside from the rhetoric, the rhetoric can be widely different. But you may have noticed that since World War I, regardless of which party is in office, nothing has ever changed. The basic underlying policies have continued to whittle away on national sovereignty, to spend the nation into insolvency, to live on fiat currency. Neither party ever really challenges the Federal Reserve System. That's a no-go zone.
Well, it seems like Trump is doing a little bit of something with the Federal Reserve. I mean,
well, like what?
Well, what's the deal with the special purpose vehicles? What's the deal with the bonds? What's going it feels like there's a lot of talk about building up debt on the balance sheets and just dissolving it and just killing the debt. And that goes into Nesara, Gesara. I'm not sure if you're familiar, if there's any legitimacy to these things. Are you familiar with these concepts?
I am very, very familiar with Nesara.
Okay. Is that a possibility?
Well, let's hope not. You have to understand Nesara, and it's the difference between the rhetoric and the reality. Let me give you a little backstory on that.
Okay.
I should have checked this out because somebody asked me about it the other day, and I didn't have the dates on it. But I think it was about 20 or 25 years ago. It's a long time ago.
It was introduced quite some time ago. You're right.
Quite some time ago.
I don't remember the specific dates, and I'm not going to hold you to it.
Yeah. When the Nesara issue first became an issue in the public, and so people ask me, well, what do you think about this? It's, as in case your listeners don't know, there's supposedly a banking reform. It's supposed to get rid of the Federal Reserve and return sound money banking to the world, and so forth. All that came up to light some years ago, and so I got involved. People asked me what I thought, and so I did a lot of research on it, and I got a copy of the bill and read it and analyzed it, and then got into an online friendly debate with the author of it, who was a retired engineer. He's not a banker or anything, but he was a very smart fellow and a nice guy. I liked him a lot, and I enjoyed debating with him. And he raised a lot of good points. And the other day I dug into my old records and I found all that still in my computer. And I'm going to, if I haven't already, if it's not already online, it will be tonight. So we went back and forth in an analysis and debate of Nesara, this proposal. And the basic, I'll deal with that first. The basic point of our disagreement was not in the stated goals of the legislation. The goals were, restore sound banking, to improve the economy, and to avoid paying all this interest to the banks, and all these things that we all agree on. That was the stated objective. But when I looked at the proposal in detail, I came to the realization nothing had really changed except the names of the people who were going to be running the scam. And like so many people, he thought that if we took this power to create money out of nothing, which is really the problem, that power to create money out of nothing, if we took that power away from those bad bankers and gave it instead to those nice, honest, trustworthy politicians, well, then everything would be fine, because now it'd be the politicians doing that. But they were still going to be creating money out of nothing and making the economy whirl because they were creating money out of nothing. And so my main point with him was that, look, I don't care who creates money out of nothing. They could be angels from heaven. But by the time they had that power for very long, the first thing you know, they're going to be corrupted by it, because that's what human nature is. So that we went back and forth on that. So that was the one side of it. Now, the other thing is, how did people learn about Nesara? I learned about it, and most people heard about it from a person or an entity that identified itself then as the White Dove. Everybody was quoting the White Dove. It was just like QAnon today. The mysterious person or entity with inside connections, inside deep in the government. And every day, there'd be a new message that came out of the internet. The latest word from deep inside is that the white hats, the white knights, were ready to arrest all the bad people any day now. And they're going to arrest this person, that person. They're going to go get all the gold that was stolen from Fort Knox and return it back to the treasury. We're going to pay off the national debt and save the American people. Stay tuned, because I think it's going to happen next Thursday. Be prepared for the next notice. This went on for years, several years, every day. It was like any day now, we're going to be saved by these mysterious good guys who were deeply embedded in the American government. And it was so encouraging. It was so exciting. We kept waiting for it to happen. And of course, it dawned on me very early that this is either just somebody looking for some kind of notoriety or having some fun with the public, or maybe this person or group was being financed by some alphabet soup agency that wanted to just calm people down and convince them that they didn't have to do anything, that it was all taken care of, go back to sleep. And so I watched that, and then finally they came out in the news. The White Dove was exposed. She was a middle-aged lady living in a trailer someplace in the Midwest, and she was I guess it was her boyfriend or a close associate with some people in a group that were all involved in real estate scams. And it was all a scam and everything. They were getting money from donations and having a good time and always feeding this, oh, stand by, folks. The revolution is about to happen. The good guys are going to win. So I went through all of this, and it's all, I found it in my records the other day. It goes on and on and on about this. So I'm going to put it up, and I'm going to tell you now that as far as I am concerned, we are living through an exact repeat of that same scenario that was led by the White Dove.
It sounds like that movie Groundhog Day that started Bill Murray.
Yeah, Groundhog Day. Exactly. Yeah.
That is crazy. I never heard of the White Dove, but I've heard of like some people talking about what Q was an earlier incarnation of something else that was referred. And I've heard this before. And when I discuss Q, I try to let people know that I'm just trying to have intelligent conversations, dialogue with people so that we can all learn. And nothing is proven or disproven at this time. It's just until you find the old lady in the trailer.
Yeah, then that's over again. It's over for a few years, and then it'll show up again. Somebody else will have a new version of it. So
have you heard of the? Because I've been hearing about this just recently, the quantum financial system, the QFS, and if you have, would this have anything to do with the idea of what Nesara represents? Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not. What's
like something to do with a quantum banking system? It's just a new banking system that has been being created. So
quantum sounds like quantum theory. Quantum theory is a very mysterious thing that nobody understands. So it's perfect for a banking system.
Well, it's called the quantum financial system, the QFS. I'll send you a little bit of information that I've got on it. And the gentleman that I think you were talking about that you debated was Harvey Francis Bernard.
Yeah, that's the guy. Okay. Yeah, Harvey Bernard.
Now, I've heard also that there are, and I'm familiar with this version of Nesara, but again, this could be disinformation, but I'm hearing that there are, if you want to look at that as being a black hat version, that there's a white hat version, or that if that's a black knight, there's a white knight, because there seems to be a lot of dualities, and maybe there are good guys pushing for something that would potentially get us away. But now I'm getting to the point where you are at. Like, we just need to wake people up. We need to get consent of the government. We need to get people on board. And I wanted to ask you one really, really important question. And this is kind of a path that I'm about to take. And I'd like to get your thoughts on if you recognize the direction I'm headed and why. And it's changing my status and renouncing my U.S. citizenship, sending in an affidavit of repudiation, and basically changing my status to a state nationalist and obtaining a passport as my form of ID. And that would also give me diplomatic immunity. And also it would set me up to a point where I could set dominion over top of the various jurisdictions to operate within our corporate American system. And I think this might be the way, like just individually. And I'm learning from some other people that are mentoring me about this. And if I can do this successfully, then I'm just going to let people know how I've done what I've done. And someone else I know is going to take that information and put it up on a decentralized blockchain that's going to be uncensorable and immutable. And that information will be out there for everybody. But it's, if you know about law, and you have your law of the air, the law of the land, and the law of the sea as per the Bible, which is, taken into consideration with court, because we are, when we're giving our oath, we're putting our hands on the Bible. So it's actually the ultimate law in there. And in that Bible, at the very beginning, God gives dominion of this earth to man. And the system has figured out a way to make us not a man and keep us as infants. Do you know where I'm headed?
Well, I'm listening. I think I do.
Okay.
I think you're following a path that many people follow. That how do I get out of this mess here? How do I not get sucked down the toilet and being flushed down the toilet with everybody else? And we've all been there. I've been there. I would never say not to do something, because I don't really know. It might work in the short term. I don't think anything's going to work in the long term unless we recapture the system, because as you say, you put your hand on the ultimate law, the Bible, and God's law and all of that. But finally, that in the long term, that's true. It's God's law. It's universal law, or it's natural law, whatever you want to call it. But then there's the short-term law when the guys break down your door and say, "You and your family into the truck." Now that is not law, but
Right.
you go into the truck. And so it's an illegal move, and we're moving closer and closer to that being the condition all around us. The law is meaningless. It's whatever the state says it is, whatever the rulers say it is, then that is your law for the moment. So that's the reality, and I don't think if we don't solve that problem, there's nothing we're going to do that's going to give us really an escape. Maybe we can delay the confrontation. Maybe we can enjoy a certain amount of freedom and protection for a little while, but sooner or later, the monster keeps growing. He's hungry. He needs more food. He needs you. He needs me, and he'll be looking for us sooner or later. That's I don't think that's a fatalistic view. I think it's a realistic view. So I'm all for doing things that can help me and my family in the short term. Like, for example, I'm trying to get whatever few assets I have out of money, because I think money is being rapidly destroyed right now, and put them into physical assets like gold and silver and some food and whatever, physical assets that have value in themselves, intrinsic value. And all of that, I'm trying to be as independent as I can, but I'm not living in the illusion that is going to protect me and my family, down the line when everybody else is, maybe my biggest enemy will be my neighbor because they're jealous of what I've got. I don't know. I have to worry about more than the state under conditions like that. So I would never say no, but I would say that whatever we do, we need to focus on solving this problem and changing the trend and beating the enemy back and replacing him. That's most of my focus is on that positive side of how can we come back to power and recapture and the freedoms we've had, and then move forward to a higher level of freedom, maybe in the next generation or the next one.
Well said. Well said. And I totally agree. And if I've learned anything, I mean, I've already kind of been in this mindset, but if you've taught me anything in this conversation, it's really to solidify the fact that the time is now, and we really need to do something now before it gets to be too late and we end up in this 1984 world that George Orwell wrote about. And it's it's becoming a reality, and if people don't do anything to stop it, it's just going to, as you said, the creature is just going to keep eating and feeding and getting bigger and bigger and bigger until there's nothing that we're going to be able to do at all.
The question of when do you start pushing back? When do you say enough is enough? When do you say this is the line in the sand? It made me think of that documentary on the life of George Orwell that I found recently and put up on the redpilluniversity.org site. We're gathering all kinds of wonderful video documentaries and presentations on deep topics like that. And so I came across this wonderfully well-produced documentary in the life of George Orwell. And at the very end of the video, Orwell is portrayed by a great actor, and I've forgotten his name, but he's on his deathbed. And in this movie, or in this documentary, sort of made up, reenacted, I should say, there's a woman in the room where he's dying. He's in bed, and she is dressed, and she appears to be like a television personality asking questions, and you assume that there's a camera there. They're kind of one of those kinds of situations, and he's in bed and he's answering her questions. And the last question is, well, what can be done about it, Mr. Orwell? He said, what is your message? What is your message from your book 1984? And of course, he delivered that wonderful line from 1984 when he talked about the future. He said, well, the future, as I see it, is like a boot stamping on the human face forever. And then she asked, well, what can we do about that? And he said, and then he turns his eye, and for the first time in the whole documentary, the actor looks straight at the camera. Until then, you think you're just watching the scene and act. And all of a sudden, here he is in his deathbed in Orwell, where the actor looks right at the camera and he says, the only thing that can be done about it is to not let it happen. And I thought, oh, wow, what a line that is. And so I've been thinking constantly about that for the last couple of weeks. We cannot, we must not, we shall not let it happen. And that's where I end.
That's great. No, it's great. And it's a perfect way to pretty much wrap things up. I do want to give you an opportunity to promote what you do. I know that you're our faculty member at Red Pill University. You have the website. I think it's realityzone.com. Is that correct?
Yes. Oh, golly, we have so many websites. It's embarrassing. But realityzone.com is our commercial site. That's where we have books and recordings on all these topics. My books and at least 100 other great, very good documentaries and books are available. That's the commercial site. The site that I've been spending most of my time on is redpilluniversity.org, because that is the movement we are building that I think has a fighting chance of doing the things we're talking about. Our object is not just to inform people. Yeah, there's a lot of videos there, a lot of information, because you've got to have that as the foundation. But after you've seen all these videos and you've read a couple of books, you get the idea, wow, this is serious. We got to do something about it. So then the next step is to put on the armor and start to fight the battle. And that's the other half of Red Pill University, because we are now working to establish campuses, we call them, in all of the local communities around the world. And that sounds like it's grandiose, right? This is a global issue, yes. And the world, not only every county in the United States, and in some counties, a couple of campuses, but in all political divisions around the world where people want to face this problem, and it exists everywhere in the world. Because you've got to have boots on the ground. You don't build movements, and that's what we need is a movement. You don't do that on the internet, and you don't do it through the mail. You've got to meet with people in your local community, you have coffee with them, you have dinner with them, you become friends with them, you know who they are, you develop a trust and a friendship, and then you can work together and you can accomplish things. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing what a dozen people can do to change the political and cultural environment of a pretty large town. I've seen it happen. 12 people. Of course, using the formula, the 1% leads the 15% that dominate the rest. So that's it. So the campuses are what we're building. So I would say anybody that's interested in what we're up to and maybe wants to consider becoming part of this movement, the place to begin is redpilluniversity.org.
I definitely want to do it. So I'm gonna check out more of the website, and I can reach out to you as well as, I'm not sure if you're is it your publicity person or your social media manager that ultimately?
Well, you've probably been talking to Carlene, and she's the social media.
Okay, Carlene. Yes, yeah. I didn't know her name, Carlene. I apologize, but I do appreciate you help me out. And is Reality Zone the best place that people can purchase Creature from Jekyll Island and directly? Because I'd rather do that than you just get a cut off the Amazon stuff or however that works.
Well, I appreciate it either way. Yeah. But our objective is, if I could give them away, I would, and in fact, we do give a lot of them away.
I'm sure you do.
But that's the best place, realityzone.com.
Well, Mr. G, I really honestly appreciate your time. If you could just bear with me one moment, I'm going to wrap things up. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have links down below for everything that we talked about in today's report. And as I mentioned, if this is your first time ever checking out any of my videos, I do encourage you to explore my channel. If you like what I'm doing, you can support me by subscribing, smashing that like button. I encourage you to hit the notification bell so you can stay up to date with my videos as they come out. Also, consider checking out my Patreon channel where I post up early access and exclusive content, and it's a way to support what I do directly. And as always, I encourage you to be the change by practicing change.